Hello and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich, your host from WTCM Radio News, and it's our weekly conversation with the journalists covering Northern Michigan, talking about some of the stories that are making headlines this week. And this week I'm joined by James Cook from the Traverse City Record-Eagle. James, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, and we're talking sports this week, and it's an ideal time for us to really get into it. As we sit here, it's Thursday morning. We're, less than 12 hours off of a big win for the Tigers, so let's start right there. Huge night for Detroit.
Yeah, and they clinched the division, obviously, and everything, but it makes kind of for some interesting kind of what they're going to do in the next few days. They got 3 games left and an off day today. You've got Johnny Peralta coming back from his 50-game steroid suspension. Yeah. So they'll probably play him the last 3 days and work him back in, figure out where they can fit him into the lineup, because obviously they have his replacement at shortstop.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about him too, because you've obviously got a team that's been playing fairly well. They've been winning. I feel like we've had this conversation before about somebody else, but they've got a formula that's been working, and now you bring back Johnny Peralta. Obviously, a good tool to have for the team too. But how much do you want to mess with what's been working? Yeah,
well, the offense has been a little bit sluggish the last week or two, though. Yeah. So maybe bringing his bat back into the lineup will help. They could play him here or there, especially in the playoffs. If they get to the World Series, you can maybe play Victor Martinez at catcher and put Peralta in at DH, and that way you can. Alex Avila hasn't really been crushing the ball at catcher, so maybe you get one more bat lineup for those National League games. For the other games, maybe you play Peralta in left field. I've heard that's some of the talk. Get him in there in place of Dirks, and just go from there.
See what happens there.
Because obviously there's a huge upgrade defensively at shortstop from Iglesias or from Peralta to Iglesias. I mean, Iglesias has been just masterful at shortstop.
Let me back up a step, because I know you know a lot more about sports and the Tigers than I do, and maybe folks watching are not quite as well versed as you are. But we've still got 3 games in the season, so we've been watching this magic number kind of dwindling down. 2 nights ago, I think we clinched a playoff spot. But just kind of in generic terms, explain to us what we're watching in terms of Cleveland and the other teams that are involved to determine how we get to this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got Cleveland is left to fight for a wild card spot with Texas and Tampa Bay and teams like that.
There's only so many games left, and they can't catch up to us, essentially, right?
Yeah, they can't catch the Tigers. Yeah. So the Tigers have clinched the division. They won't have to play in the wild card, which is not really a series anymore. It's a one-game winner-take-all type of thing, kind of almost like they used to do with if you had 2 teams tied at the end of the season, they would play a 1-game playoff to see who got into the playoffs. Okay. Now the wild card is kind of that. The 2 wild card teams play a 1 game to see which one of them moves on to join the 3 division winners. So the Tigers have 3 games to sit back, see if they can work Peralta into the lineup and set their pitching rotation. So that they've got their number 1, 2, 3 pitchers going for the beginning of that series.
I want to ask you too, because I recall over the past couple of years we felt like we had this problem where we had too much time off. Where what are we going to do? We're getting out of the groove. We've finished strong. Obviously the past couple of years too. So with this 3 games, do we just kind of kick back because the games don't matter? If we don't have to worry about the wild card game. How much intensity do we put, and what do we do with the pitching staff to keep them fresh but not get them rusty in that week?
Yeah, you may. I mean, it depends on how Leland wants to do it. He could just bring a couple guys up from the minors, let them start the last 3 games. He could just maybe pitch some of the guys like Anibal Sanchez, Porcello, and stuff like that, but only have them go 3 or 4 innings in a start, right, or something, and then bring in some younger guys and kind of give them almost a secondary start and bring them in the 4th or 5th inning and say you've got the rest of the game, type thing, because those 3 games really don't mean anything for the standings too much. So
this is the part of the season where any of those new guys could potentially, knock on wood, they could get a World Series ring for showing up for a week and calling it good, right?
Yeah. Well, most of them are probably already up from the September call-ups, but
Yeah.
I mean, this would be their time, to get another little kind of audition in and see some major league experience and go from there.
Yeah. So tell us what you're looking ahead to in the playoffs. I know Boston clinched as well, but we've still got a few games left of the season. What are you outlining in your mind for what we could be facing here down the road?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not really determined who they're going to play. I mean, you got the two wild card teams will get in, they'll play each other. The winner of that will be the 4th seed, and then the Tigers will be anywhere from 1 to 3. It looks like Oakland's going to win your other division, and Boston. And each of them is a little different too. Oakland, I don't think has the pitching necessarily to match up with Detroit, but their offense has been really good this year, and they've been a different offense than the Tigers. The Tigers have been kind of feast or famine. They hit the home run or they don't score much. They don't play small ball too much. The A's have been able to kind of mix in the long ball and play some small ball, and have been pretty good all season at pretty consistently generating offense. So that could work pretty well in the playoffs if their pitching can hold up.
The other takeaway, I think, from the Tigers, we were all had our eyes on the Triple Crown once again this year, and things just kind of fell apart due to injury, sitting out quite a bit. Where do we even stand on that? We haven't talked about that notion in weeks. Are we off the table completely?
Yeah, well, there's no way that Cabrera's going to catch Chris Davis in home runs. So that's not going to happen. But he's still going to end up, I think, leading the league in RBIs and batting average by a mile.
And he was out for, what was a groin injury?
I'm not sure exactly what it was, but yeah.
It was something. He was out for...
they'll probably rest him up the next couple of games too, and maybe play him in the last 1 or 2 if he's okay, just to kind of get him back in the groove.
Right.
But they also got a day off before this last series too, so you've got 4 days, 3 games in 4 days.
Right.
So there is that kind of that worry about having too much time off or coming into the playoffs rusty.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a day after the season gets over while those wild card series are being played too.
Well, yeah, so that's what I was going to say. Man, we got to hope we hold on and hold out, keep the intensity up. Let's talk about the Detroit Lions. I can't believe we're talking about the game this weekend, the battle for first place in the division here against the Bears. What a amazing start for Detroit. Yeah,
I know. It's just their offense has been pretty dynamic, even more so when Reggie Bush has been playing. But Joyke Bell has been just amazing as their backup running back. I mean, last week he comes in against the Redskins and just gashes them. He's just bouncing off of guys, and he's got that spin move working pretty well, just spinning away from tacklers all over. And he looked really, really good. As a guy that can come in if Reggie Bush is banged up again. But it looks like Bush is going to play this week. They're not going to have Nate Burleson for a little while, unfortunately, after a weird Lion-esque injury out on the field.
I heard it called the curse on TV the other day. But Burleson injured in a car accident on the highway at 2:30 in the morning Monday. It raises all kinds of questions, but tell us what happened. Yeah.
Evidently, he was coming back from watching Monday Night Football with some friends, and had a couple pizzas left over from watching the football game, and they were sitting on his seat. He was driving home, and they start sliding off the seat, and he reaches over so they won't slide off. And when he does that, he goes off the road a little bit and hits a median, and ends up with a broken arm in 2 places. But Lions didn't put him into reserve, which says they think he can come back fairly quickly, and bones heal more quickly than ligaments. So,
well, obviously
pretty good.
Yeah, obviously glad it wasn't a lot worse. I think because wasn't a lot worse, people are kind of chuckling about the pizza crash or whatever nickname we're going to give it. But just 2:30 in the morning and a crash on the highway. Just again, it wasn't worse, but it just raised a few questions for us.
And he was a pretty decent part of why the offense has been so dynamic, because he was giving them that other threat opposite of Calvin Johnson, so teams couldn't just double and triple team Calvin Johnson. I mean, Burleson actually led the Lions in receiving, or in in catches through the first 3 weeks among the receivers. He had a touchdown last week, and he had just been giving him a good compliment there. They get Ryan Broyles back. He played some last week. Looks like Patrick Edwards is also going to be back at wide receiver. They really haven't signed anybody else to replace Burleson on the roster or anything. Yeah. But Broyles and Edwards are two pretty good receivers that they can probably get away with for a while.
I want to ask you about Reggie Bush, because week 1 out of the gate, just amazing. I think people were talking, this is our year, man, this is amazing. And then he comes out with an injury right away, and then week 2 we're thinking, oh, same old Lions. So what goes through your mind as a diehard sports fan, the ups and downs of even just the first game and a half?
Yeah, week 2 was kind of, like you said, everybody started thinking, same old Lions. But they've always been awful in Arizona for some reason. Even though Arizona is usually an awful team, the Lions can never beat them in Arizona. They come here and the Lions beat them a lot and stuff. So a lot of people were really worried on week 3 because it's the same thing. The Redskins were an awful team, but the Lions can never beat them in Washington. Yeah. So when they actually put that pretty good performance out there and beat Washington pretty convincingly, some of those doubts kind of started going back a little bit, and you're like, well, maybe this isn't the same old Lions, because they actually won a game on the road against a team that they usually never beat, and pretty convincingly too. So Chicago will be a pretty good test this week. I mean, they've got Jay Cutler, Matt Forte, Brandon Marshall on offense. They've got a pretty interesting offense this year.
It seems like an uphill battle for the Lions this weekend.
Yeah, like I said, Chicago's probably got a more diverse offense now than they have the last couple years. They've got that dominant number 1 receiver in Brandon Marshall that they never really had when they tried guys like Devin Hester and Lions retread Roy Williams at wide receiver. So they've got that number 1 guy. They've got Alshon Jeffrey and some other decent receivers to go with him. Martellus Bennett at tight end has been really good for him, and Matt Forte at running back. And the guys that they drafted on the offensive line this year have kind of solidified their offensive line, which was their one real glaring weakness the last couple of years. I mean, their line play has just been atrocious. Jay Cutler was just running for his life back there, on most weeks. And it's been a little better the first 3 weeks of the season. So, but the Lions' defensive line forces a lot of changes in that kind of, so maybe that can make a difference.
When you look at the rest of the NFC, the North, the Vikings, the Packers, what else do you see? The Packers, not too long ago, we were Super Bowl champions in Green Bay, and now they're down below the Lions and the Bears. I don't think Packer fans would have thought that was happening.
Yeah, they're 1-2. Their defense just doesn't seem to be able to stop hardly anybody. They can still put up points, but all the running backs seem to be beat up. They've lost 2-3 running backs now. Eddie Lacy and Starks. They were relying on a 4th-round pick in their game last week, who coming out of training camp, some people were thinking Ward's not going to make the team because he played so bad in the exhibition games and everything, and then he fumbles at a crucial time that ends up leading to the game-winning touchdown for the other guys. So he's probably in the doghouse too. So who carries the ball there is a big question. I mean, you always got Aaron Rodgers slinging it, which you can rely on pretty well. Right. But their defense just doesn't seem to be able to slow down anybody.
What else jumps out at you from just all across the NFL? Other teams that you like, other games that you're watching? I mean, I'm a Bronco fan as well, so I was watching Peyton Manning on Monday Night Football. Just an amazing game there. A couple of games for them. But that game or any others that just kind of stand out for you this early in the season?
Yeah, the Broncos' offense has just been amazing so far this season, and it's kind of given their defense a little new life too, in that it's kind of like the old Indianapolis Colts, thing where you don't have to have the greatest defense in the world when you're playing with a lead. You can kind of just pin your ears back and go after the quarterback all the time. And it's the same thing with the Broncos. And when they get Von Miller back from the suspension and he can just go after the quarterback all the time, that could be crazy.
Yeah.
But and so if they're always playing with the lead and Manning always gets in the lead, then they're going to be really, really dangerous. But the Steelers and the Giants being 0-3 is a real surprise. I mean, it's the first time in NFL history that both teams have started 0-3 in the same season. And there's the Steelers are supposed to get Le'Veon Bell back this week, the Michigan State running back. Supposed to be able to maybe play this week, so maybe that'll help them take a little bit of pressure off of Roethlisberger. But their offensive line has just been pretty bad.
I heard somebody, Pittsburgh fan, maybe say, didn't know what the world was coming to when the Steelers were 0-3 and the Pittsburgh Pirates were doing so well this season. It was kind of, messing with the reality for a lot of Pittsburgh fans. But well, good. Well, let's take a break here on the briefing room. We'll talk more sports with James Cook from the Traverse City Record Eagle in just a minute. We'll be right back.
What is Up North TV?
It's TV that you do.
You pick the topic.
You write the script. You run the camera.
You edit the video.
It's your vision.
Your perspective.
Your story.
Commercial free.
Free speech.
What is Up North TV?
It's me.
It's you.
It's all of us.
View us on Analog 97.
Cable digital too.
Digital 992.
UpNorthMedia.org.
Welcome back to the briefing room. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News, joined by James Cook from the Traverse City Record Eagle. We're talking sports again this week, and we left the break talking about the Lions. Let's pick up with some more football. Let's talk high school football as we get into prep sports. The season underway. We've already had the big TC West, TC Central game this season, but give us your take on how the high school teams are looking in the Traverse City area this year.
Well, in the Northwest Michigan area, we've really only got 2 undefeated teams left. After only 4 games into the season, you've got Glen Lake is 4-0 and Cadillac is 4-0. Both of them are looking pretty good. Cadillac has yet to play TC West, so that'd be a pretty big game down the road here. And Glen Lake is looking like they had the potential to run the table with the talent that they have.
Nice. What's your takeaway from the big TC West, TC Central game, that one in week 3? Or was it week 3 or week 4 this year?
Week 3 this year, yep. I think it'll be week 4 next year. It was the earliest those 2 teams had ever met, and it was kind of a different vibe. The attendance was a lot better than people thought. People thought maybe kind of being earlier in the season that they might not kind of have the same cachet that it usually has, but it was still packed in there, and the teams put on a pretty good show and went into overtime before West was able to pull it out.
What's your understanding of the motivation to move it earlier? I mean, it seemed like this was always the end of the season game. This was the game that could maybe theoretically decide a lot of things in the conference. The intensity was high. I mean, were we trying on purpose to deflate the intensity because the rivalry was so intense? Or
in a way, when it used to always be week 9, the coaches thought that it was a little too difficult for the teams to come off of that and then go into the playoffs and kind of remotivate after week 9 kind of being the biggest game of the year in town. And then you go into the playoffs and you're usually behind in the playoff points because of the old Kent Conference and stuff like that. So you're going to go on the road then. So you're coming off this huge high of playing your rival. Then you're going to go in the playoffs and go on the road almost all the time. And the coaches just kind of found it was a little hard to motivate the teams and get them back up. And after that, and then when Ogemaw joined the league, it gave the Big North Conference an odd number of teams, so the schedule kind of had to vary. So then the last couple of years it's been week 6, and then this year it's week 3.
And you said earlier before we started too, they're going to just kind of rotate that every year now. It's going to be a different week.
Yeah, from what I've heard is this next year it's going to be week 4, then 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it'll go back to 3. I think that kind of cycle I think is what it could follow. So I don't think it'll ever be week 9 again. as long as the Big North is in its current status.
The other question I wanted to ask you about that too was, well, and we'll talk about the potential for a new conference as well. But TC West, I think, they've got virtually the next 4 or 5 games on the road, right? They're not at home till the end of October.
Yeah, well, they're home this week.
Okay.
And then I think they've got a pretty good road stretch there. And but they've got a home game this Friday, and then Central is home this Saturday.
Okay.
So you got both teams in town again for the second week in a row.
It seems, and I'm sure there's only so much they can do with scheduling, but it just seems rough to me to have, especially high schoolers, 4 or 5 weeks on the road.
And their first two games of the season were on the road. But the good thing about that is that they'll have a couple of home games at the end of the year when they hopefully maybe need them if they need to get a couple extra wins to get in the playoffs.
That's true. The proposal for a new conference, I guess they're nicknaming it the league. I don't remember the official title, but there's this proposal floating out there for some of the smaller schools in the area to break off from the Lake Michigan Conference and what's the other one?
The Northwest.
The Northwest. I was going to say Northern.
Yeah.
Tell us about that proposal. What's your understanding of it, and what schools could be involved? Because there are several in the area.
Yeah, well, it would basically be taking the current Northwest Conference and the current Lake Michigan Conference, and then St. Francis, who was asked to leave the Lake Michigan Conference because they won it all the time. It would basically throw those two conferences together, bring St. Francis back in, and then they would split it up into 2 divisions. So you'd have the big schools in one division and the smaller schools in the other division. So you'd have like St. Francis and Grayling and larger schools like Benzie in the big division, and then you'd have the smaller schools, the Meesiks, Buckleys, Frankfurts, and stuff like that. Kingsley in the bottom division and stuff. So it would keep schools grouped a little bit more by size, so you wouldn't have in Lake Michigan there's a pretty big discrepancy as far as size. You get Grayling, which is a class, a class B school, playing Harbor Springs, which is class D, in a pretty small school. Okay. So Harbor Springs would be in the lower division, and they'd be playing schools like Meesick and Buckley and Frankfurt and Kingsley and stuff like that, where they'd be a lot more competitive, East Jordan and stuff like that. And it'll just be mixing these teams in there. Plus, it'll keep travel costs down by having this, where teams won't have to go downstate nearly as much to play teams to find games and stuff like that. Especially for St. Francis, now that they're independent, having to try to piece together a 9-game schedule when you don't have those 5, 6, 7 conference games to just automatically plug in and only have to find a couple.
Gotcha. This is not a done deal yet, but they're pretty serious on working forward.
There's discussions about it. Whether it happens or not, we'll see. The schools and the athletic directors have to come to an agreement, and we'll see. But there's been changes in the Lake Michigan in the last couple of years, like we said a minute ago. When they asked St. Francis to leave and stuff. But I think there's a decent chance that it'll happen. It's a pretty interesting prospect.
We've just got a couple of minutes left. Let's just take 60 seconds to talk about the Beach Bums season. Their season came to an end in the playoffs. It came to an end on the road. And also the story in the paper, your story yesterday, the departure of Chase Birch. Tell us the off-season news from Traverse City Beach Bums.
Yeah, aside from Birch, they really haven't announced anything. They usually don't until way farther down the road and everything. But they traded Birch to, I believe it was North Dakota in a different independent league. They just got future considerations and a player to be named later from that team. So, but he'd been here for 4 years. Seemed like he kind of butted heads a little bit with the management a little bit in his last season here. But he was, for 4 years, he was a pretty good cleanup hitter for him, and it'd be hard to replace that bat in the middle of the lineup.
Well, and obviously for even quasi fans, having been here 4 years, one of the recognizable names and the strongest bats that's been on the team. So
definitely
it'll be a hole to fill.
Yeah, he's one of the franchise all-time leaders in a lot of categories, including home runs.
Let's close out today talking about the Red Wings. A lot of us not thinking a lot about hockey this time of year, but we just came off of training camp and we're already looking ahead to the season. We're glad we have a season to start out this year, so that's kind of the biggest news. Give us your 60-second takeaway on what happened at training camp and how you look ahead to the year.
The Red Wings pretty much didn't lose a whole lot in the off season. Even with the salary cap, they were able to re-sign Datsuk. But the really only losses that they had were, guys like Damian Brunner and stuff like that. They were able to even bring Cleary back. They added Daniel Alfredsson and Stephen Weiss, who are two very good second-line players. Alfredsson's a really good power play guy, kind of more of a sniper. So he'll bring maybe kind of the Brendan Shanahan type, shooter from the outside in the power play that they've kind of lacked a little bit for a little while. And then Weiss is a good two-way forward. He can play defense. He'll be a nice centerman on that second line, which will allow him to put Datsuk and Zetterberg on the same line again on the top line, so you don't have to split those two up. And then they've got a bunch of young guys coming in on the third and fourth lines, guys like Joachim Anderson and Nyquist and guys like that. They've got a good young core on defense. So, and then you've always got Jimmy Howard.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be definitely back in the playoffs again, and possibly a cup contender.
They've got a good formula. I imagine it was good to see them back at center ice again, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, after them not being there last year because of the labor dispute, it was good to be back.
I was out there just one afternoon and saw kind of the line of fans behind the orange tape there waiting for autographs. So it was nice to just kind of get the sense that hockey's back. It was good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in, James Cook from the Traverse City Record Eagle, and thanks everyone for tuning into the briefing room. I'm Bill Froehlich, and I hope you'll join us again next time. Have a great day.